Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the June edition of the Coaches Across Continents virtual learning community. Hopefully you can all hear me well. And my name is Adam Burgess. I'm the Sustainability Strategist for Coaches Across Continents. Today we will be discussing how to create a self-directed learning environment. It's a very important topic for our participants, for various coaches, for our partner programs, which is a fairly new model. So definitely we'd like to discuss this in more detail with you. So thank you very much for joining us. Wherever you are in the world, we really appreciate it. So before we get started, I'm just going to introduce the presenter today. Many of you know him, Brian Suskiewicz, who's the Chief Executive Strategist for Coaches Across Continents. Before I pass it over to Brian, just want to give you a quick background information on him. He went to Boston College. He did a master's in education. He's a very well qualified coach in the United States. Many of you will probably know him. He'll probably have already visited many of your communities. He's actually published an article specifically on self-directed learning in the Soccer and Society Journal. He's also spoken at numerous conferences all over the world on self-directed learning in places like the USA, India, Qatar, many more. So he's probably the most qualified person to discuss self-directed learning. Probably in the whole world, he's one of the most qualified people to discuss it. So you're going to be well looked after today. And also, he's met Pele, which is nice. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Brian. So enjoy the presentation, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Hopefully, everyone is able to hear me today. Hopefully there are no issues. If you can, just type in your chat box, but we're going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes today, and we're going to talk about creating a self-directed learning environment, as Adam said. Before we get into that, we're going to go through a little bit about review about what is sport and sport for social impact, and this is something Nick touched on the last webinar, and it's really using sport, and I like the second phrase there, social impact through sport. Might be one that helps describe our field just a little bit better. And that's where the games themselves and the practices themselves are doing all the teaching. And that is something that it's a little bit different than playing a game and then lecturing at the end of a practice or at the beginning of a practice. Rather, the learning is happening. The learning is happening during the activities and during the games and during play. So I think that's a key distinction as we move forward. And most important is to identify what is self-directed learning. And this is a very, very sort of long description of what is a self-directed learner. And I'll let you read that for about 2 seconds. But then I'm going to self-directed learners. I want to highlight a couple key words there. They have a couple skill sets. They've got the ability to cooperate and collaborate with others. And then most importantly, they are independent thinkers who can define problems and solve problems. And what that means is they can recognize what is the issue they're trying to solve, whether it's on the soccer field or in the community and society. And then they can strategize and try and come up with solutions for how to solve those problems. So if you think of the phrase independent thinkers, free thinkers, problem solvers, that's a self-directed learner, and that's an acquired skill set. And at Coaches Across Continents, we definitely believe that this is a skill set that you can create on the soccer field. You can develop within children, boys and girls, so that as they grow up, they have this skill set to be able to solve problems in the community. If the coach is telling a kid everything to do all of the time, and the kid never develops the ability to think for themselves, that's not really going to help society. But if we can create an environment during practice where they can develop this skill set to become problem solvers, to become self-directed learners, they're going to be able to have a huge impact, and it's going to make an impact in their everyday lives, in school, at home, with their families, with their friends. If you think about all the things you have to get through just to get through any day, it's really going to help out both the individual and the community. So why do we need self-directed learners? First, we've used the tagline quite a bit: education for a changing world. And the world is way different than it was about 20 or 30 years ago. The biggest one there is probably the second one, access to technology. If you think about it right now, I'm in California and I'm speaking to everybody live. So the world is changing so fast because of technology. It's creating this interconnectedness where we have coaches from Kenya, and we have coaches from Malawi, and we have coaches from Asia and South America, and we're all online right now. So we're able to talk and learn from each other, but that also creates a few things. I'll get to that in a second. It also means that there's problems today that we have to help solve. So right now, now that I've sort of described what is self-directed learning, before I get into it a little bit, I want you to type a few answers about why you think self-directed learning is important. I've given you a couple hints and stuff, but in your chat box there, if you can just type in a few things, or take 20 or 30 seconds to think about why is self-directed learning important for an individual, for a community. Awesome. First great comment comes in there. Children become more self-confident. I think that's a huge thing. And that's going to be applicable then, again, not just on the soccer field, but you see that confidence and radiates a similar thing. Ownership, perfect. It also looks to do empowerment. Perfect. So we got a couple good answers there. And like I said, we're going to try and keep this webinar relatively short today. There we go. Empowers youth to be innovative, challenges status quo. Fantastic. Three great things, right? I like that. So 5 or 6 great answers there. And then don't also forget that these children are going to grow up to become agents of change in the community. And that's ultimately what we're looking at is social impact through sport. So how can we change communities, change societies for the better? So in terms of some of the things we think, we don't know what the future, because the world is moving so fast and because it's changing so rapidly, in large part because of technology, we don't know what the future is going to be. And therefore, we don't necessarily know what the problems are going to be. If you think about it, we had really no access to personal computers until approximately 20 years ago, and certainly smartphones 10 years ago. We don't really know what the problems are going to be. A lot of the future was previously confined to just communities and just to countries, because we were very sort of isolated, and technology has certainly brought us together. And there's a lot of collaboration stuff, but it also means that the future itself is a little bit unknown in terms of the skill set that people are going to need to solve problems. So not knowing what the problems are going to be, we can't train someone to solve a problem that might not exist yet. So what we need are people that can solve any problem. And I think that's a key distinction. We're not going to send somebody to school to solve one problem. We want to give them and send them to school, and we want to teach them on the soccer field in a non-traditional environment to create people and children that can basically do these 3 things. They're able to communicate and collaborate well with others. They're able to think independently. And independent thinking, it's kind of a buzzword, but if you think about what those 2 words are, they don't think like their neighbor. They don't think the way someone tells them to think. They are very sort of creative in saying, all right, well, let me come up with my own answer to this. And it doesn't have to be the same answer as the person next to them, or what their teacher's expecting. The key element is that they have the ability to think on their own, and then finally be able to analyze problems. And then the last point, and this is the most one, we want these people to be able to come up, and these children and these coaches to be able to come up with solutions to problems that don't exist yet. So if they can do that, then I think that's why we think it's Coaches Across Continent, self-directed learners are going to have a real impact on society. And ultimately, that's what we're looking to do. So that's why we think self-directed learning is important before we get into how we can do this on the sports field. So again, self-directed learners, as I mentioned, they think independently, they solve problems, and this will allow them to start questioning some practices that might exist in our communities, in our countries, and around the world that might be limiting people's human rights. It might be limiting progress forward in some instances. So we want people to look and say, all right, well, is there anything that we're doing harmfully, traditionally, religiously, culturally, that we could be doing better? And that's the key question. Is there a better way? And this is sort of the focal point, the crux of self-directed learning, is you're always thinking, is there a better way? And for example, when we started these webinars about 6 months ago, after each one we get together and we talk and we say, is there a better way we could have done this? How can we improve this so that the next time we do it better? Is there a better solution? Is there a better way to transmit data? So we're always trying to say, is there a better way? This is sort of the key component to self-directed learning. Are these individuals that they're not satisfied with the way things are? They always want to sort of see if we can make things a little bit better. And by asking that question and then by coming up with those solutions, you're going to drive individual and community change. Yeah, perfect. There's a good thing there, Coach Banda. Is there another way? Is there another way to do things? Same exact question. Is there a different way of doing things? And so all this now sets the stage to how can we do this on the sports field? How can we do this? How can we create this environment during our own practices, during our own lessons, during our own interactions with children? So again, if you can just take 5 or 10 seconds and type in some things you might do to create this environment for children, and then I'll come up with some things that we've come up with at Coaches Across Continents to help deliver and create this skill set. So if you have some suggestions, how can we do this in our practices? And I know this takes a little bit with the communication to get back and forth, so hopefully you guys are now typing in some answers. There we go. Odie in Kenya and Victoria. I mean, two good things right away. Two different things that we're gonna touch base on. So great to see. The coach, has great interaction, but allows children to take the lead. And we're going to get into that. I think that's very good. Victoria talked about acknowledging everyone's opinion, and we're going to talk about that with mutual respect. Kenny Panda, having the idea of relationships with local leaders, which is very key. If you're going to change a community or society, you certainly need to be able to engage the people in that society, whether it's children, to teachers, coaches, and other community leaders. So fantastic. Hopefully a couple more answers will come in. As we look at this, I'm going to say, we've come up with 4 or 5 things that we want to do at Coaches Across Continents. And the last 2 in there from Sylvester and Paula. Yeah, definitely, if we want children to develop a skill set to be problem solvers, then we should encourage them to solve problems and not forcing beliefs and not telling them the answer, which is perfect. I like those, and that's allowing the children the ability to grow. So let's go through some things that we prepared a little bit, and I think you guys have hit on this, and we're going to hit on 4 main topics here. that you can do within your practice, within your lesson delivery, whether it's on the soccer field, sports field, even just in casual engagement with children. And you see sort of the four buzzwords there that we want. We want to make sure that questioning is the norm, that there's always the ability for people to ask questions back and forth. You guys have already hinted on idea of mutual respect. It's not this, the teacher is not the end-all, be-all, or the coach is not this massive authoritative figure that cannot interact. You know, it's mutual respect. The coach and the teacher is engaging with the children very well, but then likewise, because he gives the young boys and girls respect, likewise they give him or her respect as a coach, and you value each other's opinions, and then again support. And then I think you know, certainly all of this goes into number 3 there, getting people to develop their own problem-solving skills. So let's look at each of these, and as we get in, I just hinted there, the key for the coaches and teachers is we have to be aware that what we're trying to do, we're not trying to win a soccer game or whatever activity we're doing, and we're not trying to create hundreds of little robots that do and think exactly as I do and think, or the coach does and thinks. We want people to be able to think independently on their own, to problem solve on their own, and to become self-directed learners. So we have to let them do the skill set of that. It's a little bit of a weird webinar because I'm telling you we don't need to lecture all the time, and yet I'm lecturing a little bit right here. We want to give children time to solve problems, and those of you that have seen us on field know that a lot of time we create chaos and we create problems, and then as a coach we actually step back and watch and allow children the time to try and solve that problem. We give them a difficulty, a new rule on the soccer field or on the sports field, and then they have to come up with what's the best strategy to solve it. We give them time to work together and call timeouts and say, all right, well, get together with your team and you figure out how you want to play. So as a coach, you have to be comfortable allowing children the ability to take their own time and the ability to make their own mistakes. And sometimes it's very much a trial and error process where they don't do what you would do, or you watch and you know that they're going to struggle with their strategy. However, it's the best solution at the time for them, and by going through that process, they're going to learn and come up with a better solution the next time. And that's part of the learning process. So I said we're going to go through the 4 different things. First, you want to make sure the questioning is the norm. In some ways that you can do this, some things as a coach and as a teacher, as a practitioner, ask for their ideas. Not just yes and no questions, but what are your ideas, children? What do you think about that? And allow them to answer you in full sentences. And as they're answering, you know, listen to their answers. Just don't think about what you're going to ask next, but then as they answer, see if you can get them to elaborate on that, inquire further about what they want, and then ask the question, and Coach Band asked there, you know, is there another way of looking at this? So if one child gives you an answer, say, that's fantastic, that's interesting. Does anyone else have a different way of looking at this or a different way of solving the problem? And that way you're generating a culture within your practices where everyone is allowed to speak up and question, and everyone is allowed to have their opinions, and everyone is allowed to begin the questioning process. As a skill set as a coach, you also want to make sure you're not just relying on the one kid that's sticking up their hand every time, but you're also trying to draw out answers from all of the children. The boys, the girls, the ones sitting at the front, the ones sitting at the back, making sure that you try and engage everybody, whether it's on a one-on-one basis or in any group discussion. And also, this doesn't have to be in a formal setting. This can be during the practice in a 20-second water break. You can be talking to them. We want to generate a climate of mutual respect. And I mentioned this is not saying all the children must respect the coach because they're the coach. It is certainly mutual. It has to be. The coach has to understand that the children's perspectives are valued. We certainly don't have the best answers as a coach or as a teacher. We don't have the only answers, and certainly we don't have the best answers. And in fact, I hope we don't have the best answers. And what I mean by that is, right now, we're trying to solve the world's problems. We need a lot more children that are going to be able to grow up and continue to progress society, to make social change and positive social change. And if we do things the same way that we've always done them, I don't think things are going to progress very quickly. So we want children that are going to come up with new and creative solutions to existing problems, then hopefully then to problems as they evolve. So we want to be able to, that we value any kid's answers, that there really aren't any silly answers. There are no stupid answers, because it's really, you might recognize that a solution a child comes up with momentarily might not work, but the key thing is that they've developed the skill set to start thinking of some solutions, and then they'll be able to test it out, and then they'll learn from their experience. So I think creating this mutual respect is key, that the coach and the teacher values even what you might perceive to be wrong answers. It's an answer, and it's a good answer because it's a different answer. And that's again creating a skill set where we're teaching children how to think independently and how to become self-directed learners. Developing problem-solving skills, as I mentioned, this is sort of what we want them to do. We want them eventually to be able to solve problems. And so to do that, you don't want to ask yes and no questions. You want to ask a question that makes them talk about the solution. And here are there's about a half dozen, 8 or 9 different questions there that you can ask, that you can pose. And if you look at all these questions, none of them can be answered yes, no, except maybe the last one, is the problem solved. They're questions that make the participant elaborate on their thought process. And it makes them then question, well, why did I come up with that? Or how did I come up with that? So you can ask them, well, what's the problem? What was your solution? How else can you do it? Is there a better way? Again, that's sort of always the question that we come back to. Is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way to solve the problem? And then finally, we want to support the participants. That comes in a little bit with mutual respect, but it's very much trying to learn from each other. What have you learned from this? What can we learn from this? And so this is a bit of a feedback loop. It's very informal monitoring and evaluation, that as you go through this process in one practice, then you want to reflect on it, go through your own learning, go through the children's learning, so that you can then the next time improve from that. And then again, this comes back to the question, is there a better way? So sort of 4 main things there. And then just to go back real quick: question, mutual respect, problem-solving skills, and supporting participants in their own learning. So some things you can do as a coach and as a teacher, and this is after your practice, when you're at home having a cup of tea or coffee or dinner or whatever, you can reflect back on your own teaching environment and coaching environment. You can ask yourself a few questions, and the biggest one, I think, right up front, was it successful today being a self-directed learner? I think a lot of times we reflect back on, well, was it a good practice in terms of did we win, did we lose? Did they play well today? And that's very much a sport question. And it's a good question to ask, but it pertains only to sport. We want to look at the questions of, was this good for sport for social impact, or creating social change through sport? And in that regard, you have to ask yourself the question, did I help the students become self-directed learners? And with that, did I talk too much? Did I try and lecture them and give them all my answers? Or did I allow them to solve their own problems? Right now I know I'm talking a little bit too much, but that's the nature of a webinar. But, did you create the space the safe space for children to question existing practices? Did you give them the time to come up with their own answers? And then second to last point there, was it fun? Was it experiential? Did they learn from playing? Most importantly, was it fun? Are they going to come back tomorrow? Was it an enjoyable practice? And then, the last thing, is there a better way? Can I do it better next time? So I think that that's key. So again, we're going to come just right back. This was from the very, very beginning, the definition of a self-directed learner. And again, leaving the blue words highlighted there, allowing people, there's a lot of words in there in terms of attitudes, confidence, self-esteem. But in doing that, you get those from the ability to cooperate with others, collaborate, which means, speak, communicate, and work in small groups and larger groups, to work together. And then also being able to define what a problem is and then solve that problem. So this is what we're trying to develop. So sort of in summary here for the last minute or so, before I open it up to questions, the world is changing super fast, certainly with technology and computers. Excuse me, there's an interconnectedness between societies. We know of things, exactly, I like that, making circle of friends. And because the world is changing so fast and communities are changing so fast, we don't know what tomorrow's problems are. But we know that we need people that are going to be able to solve that problem, even though we don't know what the problem exists. So to solve a problem that doesn't exist yet, we need people that can solve many problems. So we need children and ourselves to develop self-directed learning skill set. And again, the biggest way we can ask is there a better way? So I think that's going to sort of wrap up at, sort of about a 15 or 20 minute discussion there. I guess it was more of a framework of what we do at Coaches Across Continents in terms of creating self-directed learners. And we see many of you on the field. And so we get a chance during our on-field to recognize what you're doing, and you see exactly how our coaches, Nora and Marcus and Charlie and Ruben, and so forth, are able to sort of lead coaches through learning, and that's what we want to do. So was there anything in terms of that you want to talk a little bit more about or bring up? Certainly feel free to type. Exactly. Odie's answer there from Kenya, and Odie's done some great stuff in Kenya, both with VAP and then a new NGO that he started called Green Kenya. But patience in that, and that's a key one. We only might get an hour or two with kids a week, and we want to fill them with all this information, but it's really creating the environment and then not talking too much. And I know I've talked quite a bit right now. I also want to ask you guys a couple questions. We've done these webinars now for about half the year, and we have some ideas on our next two. We hopefully have two great guest speakers lined up in a branding group that will help with telling stories, professional branding group, and then hopefully with Peace One Day in preparation for 21 September. But also want to know what topics you guys want to discuss. So want to know, is there anything... Yep, Gene, kids definitely learn step by step. And it is a process. This is not something, you can't create a self-directed learner in one day or 1 week or 1 month. But each day or week or month, you can progress towards that. Victoria, great question. So So for those of you, I'm not sure if some of you are watching this handheld, but the question is, what might be the best way to teach coaches to take a step back and let the youth take the lead if they don't allow enough time to answer questions? And so it's a little bit of, coaching education, where you might have to, speak to the coach and explain that, maybe you could give them a little bit more time. And then maybe this goes back to the question I posed, or the statement I guess I said a little bit earlier, of allowing that coach to recognize that they're not allowing for answers to come out, they're really telling answers. And so you might be able to question that coach and say, are the children learning the skill set to become self-directed learners? And a lot of that, and I think what a lot of people is not understanding or not recognizing that the trial and error process for a child is part of the learning process. and it's the way that they're able to test out their hypothesis, test out their solutions, and see if they work or not. And so in terms of when we play, a lot of times as a coach, we will set up a game, and this goes to Gene's question there. We will set up a game, and then as a coach, I very consciously step back. Even though I see that they might not come up with the same strategy I've come up with, I'll step back. So to give you an example, we might play a game where one team has to follow one set of rules. Maybe that team is only allowed to walk, and another team is able to do it. And then we step back and say, all right, what is this one team? What is their solution? And I might actually take a timeout and say, all right, each team get with your captain, and you have 1 minute to discuss among yourselves how you can win this game, or how you can come up with solutions for this game. So Elvis has said there, and it's what I've just sort of reiterated there. We want to put participants in a situation that allows them to solve their own problems, and by solving their own problems, they're going to gain self-esteem and confidence. So for the earlier questions there, Victoria and Jean, we very much want to, as I say, create chaos, or we create problems on the field. And then as a coach, we have to step back. And you'll see me on the field and other coaches, we almost walk away from the field for 4 or 5 steps. We'll stand there and cross our arms in a very sort of stubborn way, say, solve your problem, so that the children don't look to the coach for the answer. They have to look to each other, and they have to look inside themselves. And this is how we try to teach kids to learn. We want them to look to themselves for answers, not to look to the teacher, but just because the teacher has an answer, but we want them to think for themselves. So it's very much sort of obliterating the traditional teacher-student model. It's creating an environment where you don't do what the teacher does, you don't repeat what the teacher says. The teacher actually turns around and says, well, here's the problem, how would you solve it? It can be a little bit uncomfortable on the first time you try it, but at the very first time you try it, the kids are going to look back with blank faces. But by the second and third day, as you've given them time and say, I'm not going to solve your problem, you come up with an answer, they will come up with their own answers, and they'll start to talk among themselves. So it's really, again, it's trying to create this environment. So I asked, and we are going to sort of wrap up the webinar. Adam and I will stay online to type in answers and talk to answers, but I want to know what are some topics you would like to discuss. We've gone over monitoring and evaluation. We've done creating a women's rights policy. We've talked about International Women's Day. We've talked about the future of sport for development. We are going to do some things, but if you guys have some ideas that, hey, this is what our community could help with, or we know that as a sector, we would love you guys to get an expert. We are going to bring in, hopefully in July, Taji Branding Group out of Canada. Hopefully we can work out a time. It'll either be July or it might get pushed back, but how can we, I made a typo there, how can we tell their story? And they've helped us to try and hope coaches across continents be very clear with what is it that we do to create social change. Then in August we're going to try and do stuff with Peace One Day as a joint presentation on our coaching packets, and then also how we can get involved in One Day, One Goal. So what are some things that you guys want to discuss in July, August, September, October? How can we help you by getting an expert, by getting someone with CNCAC to talk, by someone with Street Football World or One World Play Project or any one of our partners? Radicalization through sport. That's a big one, but yes, that's a massive topic right now, and obviously there's been a tragedy about 12 hours ago, it looks like, another one, unfortunately. So, that's a great idea, Lynn. Paula's asked a question there, so I'm going to skip back slightly in our presentation and just leave it on screen. Create activities. Can you also think of the questions that will be asked and write them in planning? Yes. Certainly as a coach, I know if I play certain games that I want to know what what I think is going to happen. And so sort of a general list, Paula, are these questions here. And these can be used with most every activity. What's the challenge? What did you do about it? What is the solution? How did you do it? But you'll see every question there is not yes or no, and it's also asking the children, what do you know about it? What did you do to solve the problem? So we're really putting the onus and the focus on the children's solutions, not on, this is how I would do it. It's what did you do? So here's some things there. So in planning your practices, I certainly have, 3 or 4 questions for each activity that I think are going to draw out the learning that I want to happen or help them become self-directed learnings. So Elvis is talking a little bit about, specific games, which we can certainly get into, whether it's, HIV, malaria, sexually transmitted diseases. Certainly we can look at how can we create topic-specific games. So those are 2 good thoughts there. So fantastic. Like I said, Adam and I will stay on. If you have more questions, please, type them away, ask them. Or if you have other topics, type them away. But on behalf of myself and Adam and the rest of coaches across continents, I want to thank you guys for your great work. You guys are really the ones that are making change within your community. Hopefully, if you enjoy this webinar, you can share it with your coaches. So the video will be available about within the next 24 hours off EduDip, and we'll make sure that the link is available. And share this. So I know a lot of you work with 20 or 30 or 40 other coaches. They can certainly watch it for free after the fact, so they can get some ideas on how they can improve their coaching. So thank you for that. If you want to head off, you're more than welcome. We'll stay online for a minute or so as questions come in. But thank you very much. Have a great rest of the week, great rest of the month. For those of you that have representatives in Lyon with the Street Football World Tournament, good luck there. And those of you that have groups in the Homeless World Cup in Scotland, I know those. So good luck, and thank you very much, guys. So Sylvester, good question. Downloading the slides. I know you can watch the video, and Adam might have a little bit more on this. But I know we'll look into that and get back to you, and then we might be able to make the slides available. You can also go. I think the easiest way is if I remember right, is to watch the video, and you can do screenshots. So on your one of your tool settings. Should be one as the webinar is going in to do a screenshot, so that might be the easiest solution, but we will look into that and hopefully get an answer back to you soon. Elvis, yes, we'll post the link, so, and that not just Elvis, but everybody, will post the link for the webinar in a follow-up email thanking everybody, but making sure people have the link to be able to watch later and certainly share. Thank you, guys. Okay, I think that is just about everything. So thank you again. If you do have any further questions, you can email us at vlc@coachesacrosscontinents.org, and we will get back to you. So thank you very much. Or if you're watching this on a video delay and you have follow-up questions, certainly vlc@coachesacrosscontinents.org. Thank you very much, everybody.